Now you probably can. That's probably wrong. Hang on. That's probably better. Whew. Hello. So, I was early, but you couldn't hear me. And now, hopefully you can, and everything sounds okay. Do let me know in the chat. Thanks, everyone, for letting me know via various means. So, I'm Alan, and this is Snapcraft Live. We do this periodically, and the idea behind this is to answer your questions about anything to do with Snapcraft and snaps. So that's building snaps, using snaps, anything kind of developer related, but also we touch some user related stuff in here as well. All of these videos are archived. If you look on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/snapcraft.io, you'll find them. There's a playlist for all of these Snapcraft live videos. They go back a couple of months, and if you watch them all, you should be able to get bootstrapped to build a snap of whatever application you like. Hopefully, if there's any missing information, you can ask questions in here during the live sessions, or there's various ways to get in contact with us. The forum is probably the best place. The Snapcraft forum you can find at forum.snapcraft.io. The reason why I recommend the forum is because if you ask a question, then when other people answer it, then the internet at large can see that because it's archived forever on the forum, and the good old search engines index this stuff, and so when people search for it, this stuff bubbles up. So it's a good place to ask questions, and we do monitor this stuff all day, every day. There's developers from Snapcraft and Snapd and all parts of the stack who are in there and keeping an eye on the questions as they come up. So today, what I wanted to cover is a couple of things. It says up here on the title, version management and parallel snap installs. Well, we're going to do a slight change to our scheduled program. I'm going to do version management, which I'll touch on in just a minute. But I'm going to postpone the parallel snap installs and do something else because there was a thread that came up on the forum recently, and I think it's an important topic, and I think we should cover that because it's more timely. And I think it's a good idea to cover this kind of stuff because it will be useful information for users and developers alike. So we're going to cover snapshots and automatic snapshots, which is a new feature coming in a new version of Snapd, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Let's start with the first bit, version management. So if you've watched any of these previous videos, you'll know that I've built a bunch of snaps, and one of my demo snaps is something called Word Salad, which was a fabulous collaboration between myself and Martin Wimpress, who you can see in the chat right now. He's one of my colleagues, along with Evan, another of my colleagues, and they can help answer questions. If I'm sat here concentrating on doing stuff, they can answer your questions in there. So we created this snap called Word Salad. It's really simple. It's just a bash script that generates passwords for you, like out of numbers and letters and symbols and stuff. It's not really important what it does. What's more important is that it's a demo of how we can snap something. And if you want to go and have a look at this, you can get this from GitHub. If you just go to my GitHub repo, which is github.com/popey, you'll find Word Salad Snap is the repository. And there's not a lot in there. There is the Word Salad script itself. And then in this snap directory, there's a Snapcraft YAML. It's super basic. All it does is put some metadata in here. And down here, we've got a plugin dump that copies everything that's in this repository into the snap. So what's in this repository? Well, when you look in here, there's basically just one little script, Word Salad. It's a simple shell script. Okay, so it's a little example we've used. And I've got that on my local machine. And if I go to my usual directory of my snaps, Word Salad, you'll see I've got the exact same thing in there. I've got the script and the YAML. And what I want to talk about here is, let me just build this. And while I build it, I'll talk about what we want to talk about. So I'm going to just do Snapcraft, and I'm going to use this special use-lxd option. In the last few episodes of this Snapcraft Live, I've been using multipass, a VM, to build snaps. This is a relatively new option, and you get a little warning when you use it. So if I do Snapcraft use-lxd, I think I will get a warning in a moment telling me that this is like for experts and the feature may change over time. There we go. LXD provider is offered as a technology preview for early adopters, a command line interface, blah, blah, blah. It may change. So I'm just using this to show off a little bit that this feature exists here. You don't have to use LXD. If you don't use LXD, it'll use multipass. And we've talked about that in previous episodes. But I'm just going to build this using LXD because actually while I'm live streaming, my laptop gets a little bit slow. And if I spin up an entire VM, it can be a little bit slow. Under normal circumstances, it's fine. But I find LXD on my laptop is a little bit quicker. So what this is doing now is Snapcraft is spinning up a LXD container and it's going to set the container up and then build my snap. And the snap is going to be built inside the container and then pulled outside the container, and I will have that snap in my current directory. And I want to highlight something once it's finished building this. It doesn't take too long because really all it's doing is just dumping a shell script into a compressed file, and there's not a lot more for it to do. So hopefully this won't take too long. As always, feel free to ask questions in the chat. Oh, that's a good question from Andrew. I'll come back to that question. So here we go. Snapped word salad. Now, here's an interesting thing. Look, it says word salad 0.1. Interesting. Let's open this directory in my text editor of choice today, which happens to be Sublime Text. I should make that a bit wider, shouldn't I? So notice here in the metadata, I've got version 0.1. Now, that's why the file that gets created says 0.1. But what if I've made some changes to my project? What if I've done a whole load of commits to my project and it's a newer release? That version 0.1 doesn't really reflect, or may not reflect, the version number of my application. And so I wanted to talk about a few options here where we can dynamically change the version number that gets set when the snap is built. Now, if you just use version colon and a piece of text, then it could be anything. It could be 0.1111/banana or whatever code name you use for your project. Snapcraft doesn't really care what you put in there. It's just plain text. It's for humans to read so that when they go and look at snap info, whatever the application is, it's this number here, right? So it's the user presented version number. And it's also what you see on the Snapcraft. I'm trying to find the website. There we go. Snapcraft.io/Firefox. Can't spell. It's also what you see on the website. So if you go to Snapcraft.io to any application in the store, it's this version number that you see in here, right? So that's where that comes from, is from the YAML. But this is a little bit rubbish, just having a hardwired number that you have to keep changing all the time. And so there's a few options here. Let's try one of the other options. One of the other options is version git. So I'm just going to change version 0.1 to version git, and then go back to my terminal and run Snapcraft use-lxd again. So this won't take too long. But what it will do is, rather than have my hardwired version number in there, it's going to try and determine what the Git fingerprint is. I can't remember the name of it. The little hex code that you see in a Git commit. So you can see what Git commit this version of the application is. And that might be useful if you're constantly updating your application and you're pushing this to the store on a regular basis, and someone wants to know, is the latest build in the store? They can look at the version number, and if the version number contains the Git commit, then they know whether it is or isn't. And so you can see here, it's used 0 plus git dot, and then the Git commit ID, and then it's got this dash dirty on the end. And the dash dirty on the end is because I've modified the contents of this Git repo, because I'm sat in a Git repo. Yeah, and I've modified it, so that's what the -dirty is for. If I was building this off of a repo that was being built in the cloud, for example, then that wouldn't have happened, that -dirty. But that's the git commit. So that's another option, is using git as a way to change the version number dynamically. And every time this builds, it'll build based on that git commit, and it will change the version number. Now, that's okay, but it's a little bit terse and a little bit unfriendly, and you might actually want, a human readable version number. So let's try another option. So we've seen version. There's actually another piece of text you can put in here, version script. Okay. Now let's go and dig out the documentation for this, because I think that would be preferable. So somewhere here, I go to docs.snapcraft.io and let's look for version. Okay. And if I search for version, somewhere down here, Snapcraft YAML reference. This is what I want. I want to know what all of those different parameters in the Snapcraft YAML mean. And somewhere down here, there is version, and it talks here about the version string, but there's also this thing called version script. So version script is also a string, but it's a command that can be run, and that command can be run to determine what the version number of your application is. And the reason why I mention this is because what some projects do is they have a file in the project somewhere in the source that has a version number in it. I've seen this a lot in Java-based applications. I don't know if it's a common pattern in Java apps, but I've seen it a lot in Java and some other applications as well. Maybe their CI system puts a file into the project repository or builds something in that outputs the version number, so that later on you can you query that file and know, okay, that is it built the right version, for example. So I'm just going to put a file in here called version, and I'm going to call it, I don't know, let's call it 0.5. So now I have a file called version in my repository, and I'm going to change version script. So I've got version git, but what I'm actually going to do is change this to say version script cat version. So all it's going to do is, at the time when it builds this snap, it's going to run that command. And this will override version. Version is mandatory. You have to have version in there. And version script should, in theory, override that. Let's find out if that actually happens. So let's build it again. Snapcraft use-lxd. So we've still got the version 0.1 that I built with the hardwired version number, and we've got the build that used the git commit ID in there. And this time we'll get a new snap built. I mean, it's identical, but the difference will be it looked in, well, it won't actually be identical because it'll have this version file in. It will cat that version file in order to show what the version is, and that will get injected into the snap. That's the theory. Shouldn't take too long. So one of the things that I'll come back to that. Okay, so not many questions. Question from Andrew about can we run it in Docker, and it looks like Evan and Martin have addressed that question, so that's good. Boom, there we go. So you can see here, determining the version from the project repo, version script. So it used the version script to determine the version, and the version has been set to 0.5. Boom. So now I've got a word salad 0.5. And if I push that into the store, that's what you would see in that version number field. So I wanted to show you that simply because it's a nice way to programmatically determine the version number. And that's great if you're doing automated builds. Remember, we have a build system. If you go to build.snapcraft.io, you can hook this up to your Git repository, and then this can automatically build. And if you use something like this version script, then it can determine the version number at build time. And then when users are looking in the store at your application, they'll see the version number in the relevant channel that you published it to. So that's like super easy version and version script. But there's another way to determine the version number, and that is with something called adopt-info. And let's see if I can find the documentation for that. Adopt-info. Now, this is possibly more interesting for... Oh, it's actually in the same page, I think. Possibly more interesting for desktop applications. So, adopt-info is a similar way to set the version number, but it can also set other metadata about the snap. So in my snap, I have a number of pieces of metadata. I've got the version number, but I've also got the text summary and a description. And that data you might have in another file in your project. And it's common for desktop applications to use AppStream data, a common file format for describing the metadata about applications. Many desktop applications use AppStream to describe this metadata. And Snapcraft can pull in that metadata. I'm not going to do it in this example because it's more tailored for desktop applications, and this is just a command line tool. It's not a desktop application. But I just want to point you in the direction of that. If you're developing a desktop application and you have AppStream metadata, I want to point you in the direction of that. So there's adopt-info, which you put up here in place of this and this. And you specify the part where it's going to get the metadata from. And when you do that, you can remove all of this stuff because the information, the metadata, comes from AppStream and not from this text file. And the benefit to doing that is you're not having to duplicate that. If you ever change the description, you don't have to do it in lots of different places. You can tell Snapcraft at build time, pull that metadata from somewhere else, and the somewhere else is at AppStream. So let's go back to this documentation. It's a string and it's just the referenced part. So what we're saying here is adopt the info from this part down here called word salad. So let's go to this extra piece of documentation, which talks in more detail about that external data. So here it shows an example where they've stripped out most of the metadata and they've only got adopt info and then the name of the part with metadata, and that's this part here. And the extra line we need to add is this parse-info file. And there's an example down here somewhere, I think. Yes, there we go. Here's what that file might look like. So this is an AppStream file that might be in your desktop application, and it contains the ID, the unique AppStream ID for your application, the single line summary that typically would go here, and the description that would go here. And so that gets pulled in by Snapcraft at build time. And you can put all kinds of other information in here. And there's an example down here of adopt info from your application part. And your application part has a parse info that specifies the name of that XML file, which is this file here, right? So Snapcraft's quite flexible about how it determines the version number. You can hardwire it with the version string. You can use version git in order to get the git tag. You can use version script in order to cat a file or run a command in order to determine the version number. And if you're using AppStream, you can use adopt info. If you want to see a bunch of examples of how we do this in a bunch of other snaps, I'd recommend having a look at the Git repo for Snapcrafters. There's a lot of snaps in here, and the YAMLs are all in these directories, and you can see how we determine the version number from each of these projects. So, for example, let's take OBS Studio, for example. So this is a desktop application, and if we look at the Snapcraft YAML, this one is using adopt info So it's saying get some metadata from this part. And down here, we've got a part called OBS. This is quite a big YAML. Where is it? Parts. There we go. Right down the bottom, part. Now, here's an interesting thing. What we're doing here is we're not using the external metadata that's in an XML file because we don't actually have an AppStream file in that repository. What we're doing is something slightly different. We've said up the top, adopt info OBS, and then that says, all right, go and figure out the metadata from the OBS part. And the way we're doing that is with this Snapcraft CTL set version. So for OBS, we have a chunk of code here as a script, which is being run at the time when the project is being stood up, when Snapcraft is running, and it's going and getting all the pieces and putting them together. It runs a bit of code here that tries to figure out programmatically what version should be built based on what version is already in the store. And the reason we do this is so that we don't keep rebuilding everything every time we trigger a build. We only build when necessary, but it's also a good way for us to determine if there's a new build upstream, we will build it. And the reason we do this is because this YAML is not in the upstream project. With my word salad, the YAML is in my project, in my Git repo, whereas this YAML is not in the upstream project. And because it's not in the upstream project, we can't do version Git. We have to do a little bit of a dance. And I wanted to highlight this just to show you that you can get kind of clever with Snapcraft in determining what version you want to build and then determining the version number that you stamp on that file. And I think this is an interesting example because we figure out what was the last Git tag that was committed to the upstream project, what was the last release tag that we put in the beta channel in the store, and then if the version number that's committed upstream is newer than the version in the beta channel in the store, then we check that out and then build that. So it allows us to have some flexibility and have just one YAML that can either build master and always push master to the edge channel, but when there's a new upstream stable release, we build that instead. And so you get a nice version stamped file in the edge channel. And that gives us a bit of flexibility. It's a bit complicated, more complicated than some of the other YAMLs that I've shown before, but I think it's worth highlighting this. But the thing at the bottom that's interesting, notice here, Snapcraft CTL set version, and it runs a command, git describe -- tags. So what that's saying is, after we've determined which version we're going to build, and we revert the Git repo that we've pulled in order to have the right version of the source code in there, we use git describe to figure out what git tag was on the upstream project. So the upstream project tag their releases. If you look in their Git repository, there we go. And if we look in their releases, 23.1 is the latest release that they did a month or so ago. And so what this will have done is figured out that 23.1 is the latest release, and then set version will set the version of this part to be 23.1, which will then filter up by virtue of adopt info to become the version number of the file. So sure enough, if you look at snapcraft.io/OBS studio, 23.1 is probably the version that's in the store because that's the most recent stable build that we did, and that was pushed to the edge channel. Now you'll notice they've made more commits, and so while the stable release that upstream have done is 23.1, they've also pushed some more commits since then to their Git repo, and that's what's in edge. So this gives developers the flexibility to have one YAML that builds both edge and stable builds, and it means users can have edge builds and stable builds both in the store. So it's quite a flexible use, and you can see that was built today, which is pretty cool. So there's documentation for all of this, for version script, and adopt info in the documentation, but really, the best place to see real world examples is to go and have a look in the Snapcrafters repo on GitHub, because there's a whole ton of them in there. A lot of them are very similar, but it gives you an idea of how we're using it in a real world scenario. If you have any questions, now would be a great time to ask them in the chat. Feel free. So there was one other thing I wanted to mention, I wanted to talk about today, and that is snapshots. Now, snapshots are something that's been available in with Snaps for a while now. So if I just look for snapshots and search, there we go, snapshots. If you look at the documentation, we have this thing called snapshots. Now, this is the best description. It's a copy of the user system and config data stored by Snaps. Now, the data for your application, once it's installed, is typically located in the home directory of the user, and then a directory for that specific snap. So this is the data. There are other locations, but that's mainly where the data for your application exists. Now, what if you want to take a snapshot of the data that's in there? That's where this feature comes in. So I can do snap save. It gives you the commands down here. Snap save, and then the name of the snap. So as you can see here, snap save, and I can save that particular snap. Boom, done. So what that's done is it's compressed the data that makes up my snap and put it in a directory, I think somewhere under var. And if I do snap saved, word salad, it shows me a list of all of the snapshots of that application. You might be thinking, why would you do this? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is you might want to take a snapshot before you upgrade a snap so that you can go back to that snapshot at some point in the future. Another reason is up until version 2.38 of Snapd, when you remove a snap, the data is removed as well. And so up until version 2.38 of Snapd, you might want to snap save your data before you remove an application. So for example, I have Thunderbird installed, the email client. I have an Edge build of Thunderbird, and you'll find that I have some data in there. I've got 44 meg, that's my email. And up until version 2.38 of Snapd, if I did a snap remove Thunderbird, it would remove the application and remove all that data as well. And so all my downloaded email would be gone if it's in that directory, which, you know, might be a problem. And so what I could do is do snap save Thunderbird. And that will create a compressed archive, a snapshot of my email in a compressed archive. There we go. It's a 10 meg compressed archive. And so it's a nice way that you can take a snapshot to back up the data that's in your particular application. Now, I mentioned up to version 2.38 of Snapd. I'm actually running 2.39. And the reason I'm running 2.39 is because I wanted to show you a new feature that's just landed in 2.39, which is automatic snapshots. Now, the reason I want to mention this is because there was a thread on the forum where someone, and the reason why I wanted to change subject to this is because recently on the forum, someone mentioned that they did a snap remove of an application and it deleted the data. And that's the way Snapd worked up until 2.38. It's that's the way it was designed. But with 2.39, it now takes an automatic snapshot of your application data when you remove the application. And I can show you that. If I do snap saved, you can see there's my Thunderbird snapshot that I did just now. But also, if I just do snap remove Thunderbird, now that I'm running 239, it's going to automatically, hopefully, take a snapshot of my email or my email data before removing Thunderbird, the application. Hopefully. I should have chosen a smaller snap, but this makes sense because, you know, your email is quite important. You've got a lot of data in there. You probably want to keep it. So I chose Thunderbird. I think it might be doing the snapshot in the background while this is happening, so it's taking a little while. Yes, I should have chosen a smaller snap. I'm getting hellos from my colleagues in the chat. Martin says, Savik says, hello, Popey. Hello, Savik. So my colleagues, well, many of them, are currently at a company sprint in Lyon. So hello to all the people in Lyon. Oh, man, come on. My poor little laptop. Has it actually done it yet? If I do snap saved, what do I see? Oh, look at that. There we go. So, snap saved shows all of the snapshots I've taken, and I've taken some over a while. That's the one I took earlier on where I did snap save Thunderbird. This one is the one that was taken 25 seconds ago when I removed Thunderbird. And you could tell that was taken automatically because it's got auto in the notes column. So that's quite handy because that snapshot is taken and then all the data is removed. So now that Thunderbird is removed, if I do a du on snap Thunderbird, that 44 megabytes of my email is now gone. But it's not gone, is it? It's been saved. And so I can actually just do snap restore 9 and restore the data. And so now, if we do a du, there's most of my data. I don't know why it's 42 and not 44. I don't know why that is. But it's restored all my email into that directory. So if I need to go and have a look at it, I can. And if I show all the saved things, the saved one is still there. So it's not like it unpacks it and then throws away the snapshot. The snapshot is still there. So I could, you know, delete that data after I've picked out the email that I wanted to restore, and then I could throw that data away. It's a very useful feature. It comes in Snapd 239. Now, the reason why I pointed you at the forum thread is because it's also possible to use this purge option. So you can actually tell it not to snapshot the data and just like remove the application and all the data if you don't want to keep that snapshot. There's also an option here you can set which will disable the feature. Cool. Any other things I wanted to mention about that? I don't think so. But if I were to snap install Thunderbird again, then it would be able to see that data because I've put the data back. And it doesn't actually matter which way round you do it, whether you do the snap restore and then the snap install or the snap install and then the snap restore. It might have a bearing if the snap contained some background daemon, because at the point when I install the snap, the data wouldn't be there. So for that use case, you probably want to do the snap restore, then the snap install to put everything back. But for a desktop application like this, I can snap install Thunderbird and then snap restore that snapshot and it will put the data back, and then I can run Thunderbird and all my email will just be there and work as it did previously. So it's a pretty neat feature. I quite like that. I quite like the ability to do a snapshot, but you know, these things are going to sit there for a while, and you might want to get rid of them. Well, you can do that. Snap forget. So I could do snap forget 9, and it will get rid of that snapshot. So now if I do snap saved, 9 is now missing from the list, which is pretty cool. Now I've made some notes of everything I've covered here. I've linked to the various bits of documentation that I'm covering, some of the commands I've used, some of the parameters we've used in Snapcraft, and then just a little reminder of how you install snapd and Snapcraft. And I've put all this together, and I'll put this in the description below this video. So if you want to try any of this out yourself, then look at the description and you'll find links to all that documentation. I see my colleagues have been answering the questions. There's a good question from Simon. If you do a snap save with one version of the application, can you restore to another? Yes, you can. There's a question from Andrew. Hello, Andrew. About snap reverts. Okay. Looks like Martin's taken that on board and discussing with the team. It's quite convenient that Martin happens to be in a building with the rest of the team right now. So I'm glad Andrew has asked Martin that question, because he can speak to the right people. Okay. Any other questions? I think this snapshot feature will be quite compelling, because I've seen a few threads on the forum where people have mentioned that they've snap removed something and they didn't realize that the data gets deleted. And you don't want to say to people, well, restore from a backup, because, that's a little passive aggressive way of saying, tough, you're on your own. You don't really want to say that. But it's quite nice that we've added this feature now where if you do a snap remove, the data is retained, which I think some people would have expected to be the default anyway. But yes, that's a good feature, and I'm glad we've added that. So that's the end of everything I wanted to cover this time. It's a short one this week. And actually, that reminds me, I wanted to mention I'm going to be doing a bunch of much shorter versions of these videos. Rather than have lengthy Q&As, I'm going to do some shorter videos that you'll see on this channel, youtube.com/snapcraftio. I'll share them all on social media again. But the idea is that they're snippets. I asked on Twitter what people wanted from this channel, and a lot of people said they wanted shorter, tighter, like little instructional things, not lengthy me chatting away and having a Q&A. We'll carry on doing the Q&A because I think it's still useful. But I've been working on a bunch of shorter videos, so look forward to seeing those on the channel. I'd recommend, if you want to see those, then subscribe to the channel, youtube.com/snapcraftio. Share with your friends. Let them know that this channel is here. Once those videos go out, feel free to share those as well with other developers who might be interested in snapping things. There'll also be some user-centric videos in there as well. So, for example, telling you how to get snap support on particular Linux distributions, because it might not be obvious that you go to the download page for Skype, for example, and it's delivered as a snap and it points you to the snap store. It might not be obvious how you enable snap support on your Linux distribution, and so I'm going to make a bunch of those little videos that detail how you get snap support on your Linux distribution. So if you want to share those amongst your community of users, that would also be super awesome. But that's it for now. I didn't have anything else to add. Thank you for the questions, and thank you for my colleagues for hanging out while they're in Leon. I hope they're not missing anything important while they're chatting. And if you have any suggestions for additional videos that we might do, then leave a comment in the box below this video. I'll add this to the playlist with the others. We'll do more of these on a Friday at this time. We don't get as many people watching at this time. Maybe we need to look at various times that we do these videos, or something else. Maybe I think the idea of having shorter videos will be more compelling, because you don't have to sit through me chatting in order to get that content. All right. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers, everyone. Bye-bye.